One second. All right. We're live on my end as well. All right. Welcome
Boom.
in, everybody. Today is April 9th, 2025. We're in the midst of a trade war. Things are going down. Things are getting heated. Welcome into another episode of the Gentleman's Code, episode 35. What a great year it's been so far, honestly. We got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of great things for business, a lot of great things for the guys in the community. I put in the community last night, going to do an e-commerce call tonight at 8 o'clock. Going to talk through some of this stuff with China and some of the e-commerce drop shipping problems that people are going to have coming up with this trade war in the midst of it. Another 30% on America, another 50% on China, up to over 100% in total of tariffs. So you're going to want to re-strategize when it comes to e-commerce drop shipping. So we're going to talk through some of that tonight. We're going to have a live chat in the Discord. So if you're not in there, this is a perfect opportunity to get into the private meeting we're going to have tonight. Check out the link in both of our descriptions wherever you're watching this video. It'll be there. If you're watching on X, shoot me a DM and I'll get you in there to the website. But with that being said, we're in the new lab, so we got new streaming setups coming in. Be ready for some higher quality stuff coming from the gentleman all year round. Good morning, Priamo. How was your week? Also, I just wanted to touch on and mention that I wasn't able to go live on Sunday because that was the day I was moving. So I'm going to make it up to you guys this week sometime with an extra stream on top of the Sunday conversation. So I'm still unloading boxes. Was able to get it clear last night, so it didn't look like complete trash in here for you guys. But just be on the lookout for another stream. I'll announce it probably on X.
Beauty. Look at this. Bobby, a man of the people. He said, I'll make it up to you. Get another stream cracking. So, how's the week? Two things.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So, two things, right? As much as I love Pompino and what he's trying to do with the country, I talked about it. We both talked about it last week, and then I've talked about it on the crypto streams, the market streams. This is a period of delayed gratification that we're going to have to go through. And I did not expect it to this degree, but we're seeing how impactful these trade wars are on the markets and on the global economy, which, I mean, makes sense. I mean, this is the global economy we're talking about. And these aren't small tariffs. These aren't small little ticky-tacky 5%, 2%, 3% tax. No, they're slapping on income level tax on tariffs, right? Which we'll talk about the income tax and what Pompino is going to try to do with that, which now makes sense why the tariffs have been so over the top. Tariffs have also been so over the top as well because he's using it as a what's it called, negotiating tool, right? Because some people were wondering why they would be so high so early, but it's just a normal negotiation. What do you do in a negotiation? You always ask for above and beyond what you want so that as you negotiate down, you get to what you want to be at.
Yep.
So that's why they came in at such outrageous levels. And there are some countries that we had to come in that high because theirs were already that high. So
Yep.
how's the week been going? Well, I love what Trump's doing for the country as a whole. And I would prefer that he does this for the country as a whole because I know it's going to be for the greater good of the nation in the long run. So I'm going to be unselfish and say, do the right thing, even though it's, bringing down markets, bringing down crypto, etc. It is what it is. It is what it is. It's our whole lives are based around this. And this is my whole, thing that I preach to the guys inside the community, inside of the businesses that I've had. Delayed gratification. Yeah, it's going to hurt right now. Yeah, it's going to suck right now. But things that hurt right now that require change, that require some faith, are typically the best things for the future and make your life a lot easier down the road.
That's
So
true.
I'm going to trust. Yeah, I'm going to trust.
That's true. Yeah, so a lot to unpack, even with what you just said right there. There's so many moving components to it. I guess we could. The first one I'll start on is the markets because that's what everybody sees. It's either red or green in a day, right? And we've been seeing a lot of red lately. And there's a couple components that I think people don't understand in terms of a recession slash what the tariffs are actually doing for the economy versus what you're seeing in the markets. So what you're seeing in the markets now, this is a completely high level take, but the markets are human emotions. It's a graph on what people are doing with their cash in the market. They're buying it or they're selling it. And what you're seeing with the tariffs is a lot of uncertainty. Like with China, they're going back and forth now, raising tariff prices. So businesses that are going to be doing business with China, like Apple, is a huge one, right? One of the biggest companies, the biggest company in the world, is a huge player in the Chinese market. So that is very unfavorable for them from an uncertainty perspective. Apple investors are going to be like, okay, well, Apple's going to have to retool. They're going to have to change up how they do things because of the uncertainty. 100% tariffs now. An iPhone is going to cost more money when it's brought in from China, when it's manufactured there. So that's uncertainty in the markets, and that causes fear with investors all around the world. And what people have to understand is that the United States economy and the United States GDP and the United States tariffs are separate from the global NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange, because everybody around the world, how many people are in the world these days? 8 billion. All 8 billion people in the world can invest in the S&P 500, in the NASDAQ, and can buy those stocks. But there's only 300 million Americans that Trump is putting these tariffs in place for, to work for. So there's a huge disconnect between people believing that you can invest in the stock market, in the NASDAQ, in the S&P 500, or even Apple stock, or sell it, as opposed to buying it, selling it, getting rid of it because you see uncertainty. Everybody around the world can invest in that, but these policies that are going into place are to benefit the 300 plus a million Americans. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there that you see people talking about as, they're talking about recessions and the stock market going down. Yes, the stock market is going down, but I believe that's due to a lot of uncertainty right now. And a lot of people can't see where this is going in the long run. Manufacturing takes a long time to get up boosting, and that's the goal of these tariffs, is more domestic production. So that's my first point. I'm going to get your take on that, as people's emotions in the market are really driving the fear. And as you see red, it's really easy to also just hit that red button, like you said. And it's tough because people want to buy and want the market to go up, but there's so much uncertainty right now.
Exactly. And so I'll say two things with the emotions. The first one would be they just spoke with Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, he did an interview the other day, and he was talking about how some people just quite literally are not emotionally fit to own stocks, and for that matter, obviously crypto, because it's just too much mentally. The emotions are way too much for them, so they buy high, sell low, capitulate, et cetera, et cetera. It just happens all the time. People cannot handle the emotion of it. They can't understand what the levels are and how you have to play these levels and what makes most sense, because everything's a probability. So you have to play probabilities. It was more likely that we were going to be bullish going into 2025 than bearish the way that we are right now. So what did most people do? They positioned bullishly with risk assets. But what we saw is the less likely outcome, which was this tariff trade war. Well, it is what it is. You have to readjust your positioning. So, it goes both ways. Some people, whenever the price is going up, they think it's going to go up forever. Well, it's the same thing with to the downside. Like if it's going down, they think it has to stop at some point. So I'm just going to start buying here. I'm going to start buying here. It has to stop at some point. So they just don't believe that things can go lower. But the reality is, and this is what we were talking about on the side of the Discord yesterday, was when you lose certain levels and you have a global trade war, a black swan event unlike any other we've ever seen before, sometimes it's better to just sit on your hands and say, all right, we got to wait to see what the hell happens until this resolves and we can get some clarity in the market so that we can go ahead and start to reposition, because people who are trying to trade in this type of environment are going to get absolutely annihilated because there's no alpha, there's no strategy, because it doesn't exist. The markets are completely moving based off of news right now, and you have no idea what kind of news is going to drop.
Oh yeah.
So there's no reason to be trading right now. Like you just can't. It's just news driven.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. And one of the points that you mentioned before, are on the crypto side, I think that it is important for the crypto markets to hold certain levels, because that's the whole point of crypto is to be decentralized and not a part of the government and an asset and a currency. And where a lot of people, and I've seen Jack Dorsey is becoming more vocal and more vocal about his stance on Bitcoin, and he's saying that Bitcoin's the digital gold, and we see what the value that gold has held over the years. So if Bitcoin could be more than just an asset, like a holding asset where you just park your money, and can actually become a currency, that is where it's going to take the next step, and can go to trillions of dollars in market cap. So getting to that space, and I hope Bitcoin can do it with technology, and I think other coins are slightly better with how they do the technology, maybe not the holding of an asset type thing, but that's where we're going. And we've talked about this a lot, of where the future of cryptocurrency is going, in terms of where people with the government does with US dollar, printing dollars, and then they're able to do this kind of stuff where they could go put on these tariffs, and it's going to drive up the cost of treasury bonds, and it's going to do all different types of things to the market. So crypto really has the chance, and I think it's held good levels, and maybe not the levels that we would want it to be held, but it has held good levels in terms of a decentralized exchange and currency, as apart from US dollar and maybe even Chinese yen now, because those are the two most affected, and the euro as well. I feel like the euro is getting affected by this stuff.
Oh yeah, and what you're saying is right. The how well crypto has held up so far is hugely, what would you say? The future of crypto is fantastic, because clearly the way that it's held up during this trade war has shown that it's been adopted on a much larger scale. Bitcoin's getting adopted. It's going through its adoption phase as we speak. So it's amazing how well it's held up, because in previous cycles, crypto would be fucking annihilated
Yeah.
right now. Bitcoin would be back down to like 20K. Like, it would be, I mean, don't get me wrong, we got a lot of downside, but it would be on the ground right now.
Because the people hold them as a secondary asset, as opposed to their stocks, as opposed to their whatever investments they do have, real estate. But now it's becoming that it is becoming that first class asset to hold, and that's the whole point. Is what I was trying to say, is the decentralization of it, is that this type of stuff with government trade wars or government inflation and printing should not affect the crypto market. Is the goal of it. Essentially, the decentralized exchanges shouldn't be attached to a government, shouldn't be attached to trade and tariff wars.
Right. Yeah. If they start looking at Bitcoin, which it is, the digital gold, then that should be the hedge against the system. So, yeah. So,
Yep.
as these trade wars take place, all these things start heating up with tariffs. You saw how gold has been ripping to new all-time
Yep.
highs over the last 6 months to a year. Why? Because they were preparing for this. People behind the scenes, they know this shit's happening before it's going to happen. Warren Buffett, back in October-ish of last year, right around that area before this last leg up in equities and in crypto, what did people talk about with Warren Buffett's portfolio? He was exiting most of his risk assets and rotating all that into bonds. Oh, everyone's like, "Whoa, what? Recession's incoming. What's he doing?" Da, 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 da. And I heard people saying, "Oh, Warren Buffett's washed. Oh, Warren Buffett doesn't know what he's doing." Da, 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 da. No, no, no. Warren Buffett knew exactly what was going to happen. Guess what? Warren Buffett gets to go to board meetings with the largest companies in the world and talk to their board members before he invests in those companies. You don't think Warren Buffett has people in the government he talks to that he knows what's going on with government policy? You don't think Warren Buffett has people that are talking to the Trump administration as they're coming in, that all right, he finds out they're going to win the election? I'm saying, so he has information before we get the information. So what he was doing is he was proactively making his move in his portfolio for something like this to take place. And then it did. So that's just something in the back of my head I'm going to keep in mind for moving forward, is whenever I do see these large players making these moves ahead of time, sure, there might be a couple more months of upside left in the market, which I could benefit from. But somebody like a Warren Buffett's going to have to do it ahead of time, because he has so much capital. It's impossible for him to just click a button one time and then sell $1 billion worth of stock. It doesn't work like that. There's not a lot of buyers for $1 billion of stock.
Or
So
300 billion.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he's probably selling 10, 20, 30 billion at a time.
Yeah.
So you do that over the course of months, not over the course of a day, like people with the smaller portfolio. So the overarching point I'm making is people saw these things coming. So you have to be forward looking and understand that, okay, well, now we know how tariffs are going to affect these markets. What's something like this that could happen in the future, right? So just something to keep in mind. I want to talk about Scott Bessent quickly, just to give people a background on this gentleman. So the Scott Bessent, I'll actually pull up a article here real quick. He was actually on Tucker. You said you watched it, right?
I watched a few clips of it.
Got you. So I
Didn't
did
watch the
watch.
full thing.
What was your takeaway originally?
My takeaway was that this Scott was a very smart guy. I'd never really heard of him before he got into the administration, but I liked some of the points he made, and I guess he was a world-renowned economics teacher, so taught economics and had a lot of different things that he did in economics. And one of the things, and well, we touched on it earlier in the show, the clip that I saw, about a 6 or 7 minute clip, was he was talking about in a trade war, essentially of what's going on now with China and the U.S. is that the country with the deficit has the leverage because they're already losing money, right? These like the United States to China, we lose money every year in trade. We have a trade deficit. Don't know what that number is exactly. I'm sure it's out there, but we lose billions and billions to trade to China because we buy a lot from China and they don't buy a lot from us. Pretty simple. Now, in the situation that's going on now, and what he was describing is the surplus country, so China in the situation, they're the ones at a disadvantage because they have the most downside when this trade war hits, when these tariffs hit, because we're the country that's buying from them. So when we put on 100% tariffs and things from China are going to get 100% more expensive, that's not incentivizing Americans to buy Chinese products. That's incentivizing people to buy from China. So China's the one at the disadvantage. They're the ones that's going to lose billions and billions of dollars in this trade war because we're the ones that are going to be making more money elsewhere, buying products from other countries, buying products from our own country. And then China's going to be losing money because their largest consumer, 8% of the GDP, comes from the United States. So that was a very interesting take that he took. And another thing that he said was that China made a mistake retaliating on the tariffs because he knew Donald Trump was going to raise the tariffs again if they did. So he said that China made the biggest mistake they could have made was instantly retaliating instead of sitting back, waiting, analyzing the situation. And so far, I think China is the only country to retaliate, which goes to show like what Donald Trump has been saying is correct. And also, the minerals, I don't know if you saw this, but China cut off the 7 key minerals for the whole world. They said we're not selling them anymore, which is what Donald Trump has been preaching, is that we need our own minerals. We need to mine for our minerals. We need Greenland for the minerals because China wants Greenland as well. So it's all starting to come full circle. As you know, people think Donald Trump's crazy. It's like Greenland. Okay, well, what does Greenland have to do with anything? Okay, well, if we get into a trade war with China and they cut off the rare mineral access, now we need another repository to go mine minerals. So that's where Greenland comes to effect. So you're starting to see the things unfold that maybe you wouldn't think there was a connection between Greenland and a trade war with China, but now there is that connection because China just cut off 7 key rare minerals. So that was, something that Scott was saying was, China made a mistake in retaliating too quickly, and now they got slapped with another 50%, and then they retaliated again with another 30%. So we'll see what Big Don has to say today.
And so these guys clearly thought this through. Dude, we're talking about geniuses, the highest level businessmen, economists, hedge fund managers in the world with Scott Bessent. These guys know what the fuck they're doing. So now you understand, oh, makes sense why we were trying to make a mineral deal with who else? Ukraine, right? Now it makes sense. Oh, why are we trying to make a rare earth deal with Ukraine? Well, because trade war with China. Now there's no more rare earths that they're trying to sell to everybody. So, and this is also exposing the weakness that we have from a manufacturing standpoint and developing things that we need inside of our nation. Because as soon as something does happen with China, you see what happens. They can cut off the rare earths. They can cut off medical supplies. They can cut off medicine. They can cut all these things off from us. So why are we dependent on our largest economic competitor, our largest economic enemy, which it's unfortunate that we are that way, but it is the reality. China is trying to outcompete the U.S. for world supremacy. That's just the reality of it. So why would we be dependent on our enemy for things that are essential for our day-to-day lives? It's not a good idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're seeing that. And so what was genius about these tariffs on top of all this and trying to fix these trade deficits and bring this wealth and riches back to the US, which is amazing, is so Trump appoints Scott Bessent as the secretary. So I'll actually pull it up right here. So I'll just read this quickly. So Scott Kenneth Homer Bessent is an American government official, investor, and hedge fund manager serving as the 79th United States Secretary of the Treasury. All right, since the beginning of this year. So here's a little bit of his background. So before his government service, he was a partner at the Soros Fund Management. Yep, the George Soros that you guys know about. So Soros Fund Management, which is a hedge fund, and the founder of Key Square Group, a global macro investment firm. So this is what this guy's done at the highest levels for multi-billionaires running hedge funds, investing, macroeconomics. This is cream of the. This guy's the best. Okay. So after graduating from Yale University in '84, Besson began a career in finance. He was hired by Soros Fund Management, eventually becoming the head of its London office. In his role, he was a leading member of the group that successfully bet on the 1992 sterling crisis, generating over $1 billion in profit for the firm. After he left the Soros Fund, he established his own investment firm, Key Square Group, in 2015. Okay, he's doggy. He's called financial economic collapses in the past. He's made billions of dollars in profit. Dude's knows what the fuck he's doing.
The key word there is profit, not revenue. Profit. That's take home.
Take home profit on top of what they bet. So, okay, he knows what's going on. So what was genius about the tariffs and the time they implemented it? It might have been lucky, could have been planned as well. China just recently entered into an economic depression. Okay? Just recently, right before the tariffs, they were entering in an economic depression. Their currency's devaluing, markets were in a bear market, economic depression. So not only do they get hurt by these tariffs, obviously, get a huge impact on that, but the fact that they're going through this during an economic depression gives the Trump administration even more leverage in the situation because China is going to squirm so much quicker and that much harder due to their the state of their economy right now. If they were booming, everything's pumping, economy's cooking, they would have more. They could squirm for longer. They could hold out for longer. They could wait to tap. The time in which they applied the tariffs, genius. As they're going through an economic depression, and then boom, on top of it, bang, let's hit you with these tariffs. The yuan, the currency there, is at all-time lows within the last couple of years. The U.S. dollar is the strongest it's ever been against the yuan. They're getting cooked.
So something that I heard people saying was, and I kind of believed this too when I first read it. It was that they were putting these tariffs up to inject free trade into the market. And like we talked about before, these were a starting point. When you go to sell a house, you sell it for a little bit more than you think you're going to get it for. If you think your house is worth $900,000, you might put it up for $1 million, and then you have some wiggle room to come down and meet in the middle for $900,000, right? That's the same idea with the tariffs at 30%. Maybe you want to negotiate down to 20%, 15%, whatever. And what I heard people talking about was that Trump wanted to inject free trade. Wanted to put tariffs on, reciprocal tariffs that match them, but ultimately get them down to zero so that way we could have a free trade economy. But as this continues to go on longer, and specifically with China, I don't think that's the case. I think he really wants the revenue from the tariff. He wants the tax money from the tariff. He wants those billions and billions of dollars coming in from China. He doesn't want the free trade with China because that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make the U.S. as much money. It will make the goods cheaper, and it will make, people buy more junk from China and more junk from Vietnam or India, right? But we don't need more junk and just plastic crap from China and India, right? We need the revenue coming from China. We want the money and the cash coming in. So that's, that's something that I've kind of been waking up to as this is going on, like these tariffs might be permanent for a couple of years because they want the revenue coming in. They don't want the free trade just yet. And I think that's down the line, as this goes on for 3, 4 years and we make billions and billions of dollars from it, then it's like, okay, these countries are weakening. Their economies aren't as great now because the U.S. is making so much money. Now let's go back to that policy. All right, you go zero tariffs, we go zero tariffs. And now we inject free trade back in there, and we'll see what happens with that. That could be part two of this master plan. But what's your take on that? Is that something that you think they're thinking about behind the scenes as well?
Yeah, it makes sense because so they explain this. This is how the tariffs are going to work over a longer period of time. They're going to keep them on, but over time, as industry, companies, manufacturing, all these things start to move back to the US to bypass the tariffs, it does two things, right? So one, yeah, right now the tariff income is going to be super high, beautiful, enrich the treasury, enrich the American people, take off the income tax, which they're talking about trying to do. Beautiful. You make money on tariffs, you tax other nations, you tax other governments instead of taxing your own people, so you can enrich your nation, enrich your populace, which is what you should be doing, not taxing your own populace and then getting the other countries around the world rich. Stupid. But beautiful. You tax the other nations, you put tariffs on them. Great. Bring in money into the treasury. As companies start to move back to the US, now the income from tariffs will start to move down because these companies are coming back to the US to bypass the tariff. But what does that do for the economy? All these companies are now back in the US, new jobs, income for these people in the country. So what are these Americans who are now making money from working for these companies doing? Paying tax in the US on goods, on services, sales tax, all those sorts of things. Guess what these companies that are moving back to the US also doing? They're paying taxes to the US government. So as the tariff income starts to go down over time, that's fine because that's going to get counteracted with all the money that's going to get brought back in through other
Yep.
types of taxes through these companies coming back to the country. So it's beautiful. Again, delayed gratification. It's going to hurt right now. It's going to suck right now. But as you incentivize these companies to come back to the US, you're going to make things a lot better in the long run because you're going to enrich the American people. You're going to make money on tariffs in the meantime. And as the tariff income goes down, the income on taxes inside the nation is going to go up. So you're still going to make that money. Either way, you're going to make the company richer or the country richer. So, but I agree. They're going to leave them on, and then that tariff income will just naturally go down over time as industry comes back to the U.S.
100%. Yeah, so and on the point of income taxes, these tariffs could hopefully bring in more money than the American people will have to pay in income tax per year. Also, tax season, you got about a week left on your taxes, so get those filed, everyone. And hopefully, people having an extra, I don't know, what is the tax rate, the federal income tax rate, 6% or something like that, depending on who you are. Um, you could spend that money inside the economy. So not only will it inject money into your pocket, but it's going to inject money back into the economy. And also, if people want to invest that extra money, that's a great opportunity to put it back into the stock market as well. Not just spend it and just, buy more food or whatever, which is great for small business, which is great for corporations, but it's also great for the stock market. People are going to invest more money too. So if people have more money in their pockets, they have more leverage to do different things. Maybe they want to invest. Maybe they want to buy more stuff. Maybe they want to go on vacation. Whatever it is, they're going to have that option now with more money. And that's the ultimate goal, is to make the American people more enriched.
Exactly. Make the American people richer. Richer. That's good for everybody. It doesn't hurt a nation to have your middle class and lower middle class paid. It does not hurt your nation. Maybe companies are a little bit less profitable because they're not hiring slave wage or slave labor from illegal immigrants who are going to work under the table for a few dollars on the hour. Yeah, maybe it'll hurt the bottom line of some but businesses, but that's not the idea. The idea is not to continue to enrich the 1%. But this was another great point with the stock market. They're asking Scott Bessent that we were just talking about on Tucker's show. They asked him, well, what about the stock market? Everybody keeps talking about the stock market going down. That's, a good way to see the health of the economy, et cetera. He goes, no, it's not a good measure of the health of the economy. He said the stock market, the top 1% or 10%, You're gonna have to,
I think it's 8%.
yeah, top 8% of people, right? Wealthiest people in the world own, uh, I believe 80%
I think
of
more
the
than that.
stock market.
Yeah, I think it was
Yeah,
like 90.
90, right? Above 80% of the stock market is owned by the top 10%.
Yep.
So when the stock market goes down, it's not impacting the common man the same way it's impacting the multi-billionaires and multimillionaires. So, and this is the point that Trump was making. He said, "Hey, I'm here for the Main Street guy, not the Wall Street guy." Okay? Wall Street has run our economy for too long. Wall Street is not a measure of how economic growth is doing because our economic growth, our GDP has been stagnant, yet Wall Street and the stock market continues to go up. So clearly it's not showing our growth as a nation, and the way that our nation was heading was towards bankruptcy. So clearly the stock market and its performance was not a good indicator of economic health.
That's true. We talk about that, how the stock market's straight vertical for 30 years now
Yep.
with a
But what
couple
has our nation
blips.
been doing? Exactly. So all this wealth that's been generated is, yeah, we play the stock market, yeah, we play crypto, but it's all fugazi. It's just a fucking number on a screen.
Yep.
It's just the stock market is just a cause of inflation. So so the point I'm making is forget that. Let's make the people richer in the US again. Let's actually increase the GDP per capita. Let's increase the standard of living. Let's make every person in this country richer as opposed to poorer because the middle class and the lower class have only gotten poorer compared to the wealthiest people in this nation over the last 20, 30 years. The stock market, the discrepancy is right there. It's right in front of your faces. Top 10% own over 80% of the stock market. Over 80%.
You said the key term there that not a lot of people know what it is, but it is the most important factor for quality of life all around the world. It's GDP per capita. That is the most important statistic and number that you need to look for in a nation to see how rich their people are. And how do you calculate that? Well, let's break it down very, very simply, right? So whatever the country manufactures, or it doesn't even have to be manufacturing, it could be services, right? You could be a tech guru developer, or maybe you do human resources where you connect with customers and you interact, right? That's providing a service or a product to people who buy that product, right? And it could be domestically buy it or foreign buy it. That is your gross domestic product, the products that you produce in your country, right? And how do you divide that? You divide that by all the people in the country. So your GDP divided by the number of people per capita. That's how you get your GDP per capita, right? Easy number. So the more stuff that we create here in the United States, whether that's services, that's tech, that's AI, that's whatever it is, right? Or if it's manufacturing, products, iPhones, Teslas, whatever it is, beds, pillows, right? It could be anything. As long as you're creating that stuff here and people are buying that stuff, that's going to increase your GDP. So that is the ultimate goal, is to increase more production here, services and products, and then people all around the world buy that. That is how China has caught up to us. They've increased their GDP per capita because they have tons more people. They have like 2 billion people, but their economy wasn't that great. So their GDP per capita was super low throughout the 1900s. And then early 2000s, we talked about this, they got in the World Trade Organization, started to trade with other nations and were able to increase their GDP per capita and enriching their country. So that is what they're trying to get back to in the United States, is this GDP per capita number, increasing revenue in the country while also trying to cut taxes is an ultimate goal as well. And that is how you enrich the people. So people need to look out for this GDP per capita number, and that is done. The only way to do that is by increasing production. And I actually saw an interesting stat around this as well, is that the GDP has slightly increased each year in the United States. But can you take a guess as to why the GDP may have increased? Not due to manufacturing. We know we've been doing less manufacturing and less stuff like that. But it's because we've been raising the debt every single year. So they're able to raise the GDP just with the debt that they increase. So whether that's with the government, whether that's the defense budget or whatever it is, things that, people buy airplanes from us, they buy the Boeings and the fighter jets and missiles and rockets. So all this money that the government injects into the economy is basically brought in by the debt that they're raising the ceiling by or that they're printing more money by. It's not actually by creating stuff. It's another fugaz. The GDP is rising, but we're not actually making more stuff, and we're not providing more value.
Man, that's the essence of what was happening with the stock market too. What you just said, it's all fake. It looks like things are going well, but they're clearly not. We've been talking about this for months. The nation's not building new buildings. I don't see the infrastructure in our nation getting better. It's getting worse. Bridges are collapsing. New buildings aren't getting built. It takes 10 years to get approvals in California to be able to build a tunnel, and then da, da, da. It's absolutely insane waste of money, no innovation. We're completely stifling ourselves with all the regulation, rules, wasteful spending. It's terrible. It's not good. But yet our number for GDP per capita was going up, and the stock market's been up only. So people are like, "Oh yeah, it's all good." It's not all good. I was just as you were talking about that, I was thinking about something too that makes sense now. I was thinking about the government spending. So, the model once they passed the income tax, and we were talking about this in the the Constitution. One of the amendments they had made was one of the first amendments ever, where it went from giving people of the nation rights to taking away rights. And we saw this shift in the Constitution where the government started taking things away from the citizens, which is a bad shift. It's not about taking things away from the citizens, it's about protecting rights. So one of them was the abolishing alcohol, and the other one was the income tax. So the point I was making is what was happening now for so long is the government has been extracting wealth from its own people through income tax, through taxation of its own people. And then what does the government do with that money? They send it all around the world to other countries, to other governments, to other people, to other businesses, enriching those nations, enriching those countries through war, through what's it called? Government contracts, through all these ways that we extract wealth from our own people and send it to other nations. Now it makes sense how the middle class and lower class have gotten so poor is because we've literally taken our own wealth and just sent it across the world, leaving our nation. Think about the trillions of dollars of wealth that have left our nation through government spending. Now, if you reverse that and you take taxation and tariffs from other countries, that's a net plus. And stop taxing our own people through the income tax, that's a net positive now, where you're taking wealth from other nations, other companies, other countries, injecting that back into the American country through the form of US dollars or whatever they pay us in. Now you're making your own people richer. You make the country richer again. And it makes sense. It's like, oh yeah, we tax our own people and then send that money across the world. We're literally extracting wealth from ourselves and giving it to other people.
And the way that these other countries would buy into our markets and stuff, that is what would increase the wealth of the 1%. Because like we just talked about, 8% of the top 8% of the country own 90% of the stocks. That's all the wealthy people. That's, the other 92% are people that probably work day jobs or don't have jobs, or they work at McDonald's, or they work at customer service jobs where they're filling coffee jugs. Like, those people aren't buying into assets like that. They're not buying real estate in today's day and age. They're not buying hundreds of shares of Tesla or Apple, right? They're just working jobs, and their form of investing is just take 5% of my paycheck and put it in a 401k, right? That is how majority of people invest. And now we know that the 401k is a fugaz because that's how most people invest. And we've talked about, the problems with that, and how the 401ks can't, it doesn't really enrich you. It doesn't help anything. And the people that I do feel bad for in this whole trade war situation are the people that have invested in the 401ks for 40 years, and they're coming up on retirement age, and now it's just getting decimated right before their eyes, right? 20% or whatever. Those are the people I feel bad for because they were just part of the system that was ripping them off, working a middle class job for so long just to get decimated like this. So I do feel for them, and they were just part of the system, is how it goes. But like you were saying, taking our wealth, United States citizens' income tax dollars, enriching other countries with it, trying to, I think the reason they did that is to put the American ideology across the world, right? Which probably didn't do a good job because most countries hate us anyway. So they didn't really do a job. Maybe like a military projection worked because we're in every corner of the globe. But then those rich people in those countries were able to kind of invest and make corporations bigger. Right? It's the corporation bureaucracy of these elites that run these corporations all working together. Like you buy from my corporation, I buy from yours, enriching both corporations. But then it's just leaving the American middle class and lower class behind.
Yeah, absolutely. They're extracting the wealth and taking it to other nations. The other thing is what they're doing with the tariffs we talked about is they're creating an incentive to pay the people here in the US, right? You saw Trump do a press conference, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, with all the blue collar workers behind him. And he's talking about how tariffs are going to, protect the American workers, protect the American industry, which is exactly what it is doing, right?
Those were West Virginia coal miners, by the way.
Come on, baby.
Yeah.
Oh, dogs. So Pompino, he's understanding that you got to protect the American industry. This is why other nations have tariffs on the US. Oh, well, tariffs don't work. You shouldn't put tariffs. They don't work. Okay. But then there's 100+ countries we just put reciprocal tariffs on because they have tariffs on us. Okay, sure. So the reason that these nations have tariffs on US product and US industry is to protect their own nations, companies, and industry because they want their own. All these nations had no tariffs on the US. The US companies could just come in and fucking boom, decimate the competition because they're just so much richer than those local companies. Okay, fine. So what Trump is doing is the same thing for us. Now he has to protect our workers, our companies, our factories so that they can be competitive around the world and therefore give jobs to the people in the US. Where there's an incentive, I'll show you an outcome. Okay. These business people who run these massive corporations that are moving jobs overseas, they're not necessarily evil people. They're simply following an incentive. They run a company, they run a business. The whole point of a company is be as profitable as humanly possible, make as much money as humanly possible. Okay, well, if you incentivize me to go create a plant in China and have slave labor over there in China effectively and be able to make my product for $1 as opposed to 10 in the US, and then I can come back and sell it in the US without a tariff and make 90% more money, what do you think is going to happen? Where there's an incentive, I'll show you the outcome. The tariff now, you see what happens. All this investment Trump is getting back into the US, the trillions of dollars he's been able to secure across companies and countries. What is this investment he keeps talking about? Oh, they're going to invest in the US. They're going to invest $1 billion, $100 billion, $1 trillion into the US. What does that mean? They're saying that they're going to build plants, they're going to build infrastructure, they're going to build business in the US, invest in the US so that they can avoid the tariffs.
Hire
That's what he's
people.
talking about.
Yeah, that number has salaries in there as well to run the plants. Payroll is one of the biggest expenses of any business. If you're going to hire 100 people at $100,000 a year, what is that? $10 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, so
payroll is a huge expense.
Yep. And guess who pays payroll tax?
Yep.
Those businesses, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it makes sense. Does it hurt? Absolutely. The other thing too with the stock market, people got to understand, it's why you got to sit back right now and allow this trade war to play out because it just is such it's just a black swan event. You can't prepare for it, nor can you trade through it. You just can't do anything right now. The reason that the stock market is acting the way that it's acting is investors don't like uncertainty. It's not because the US is going to be in a worse off financial situation or economically down the road. Actually, no, we're going to be in a much better position economically, which is going to make the stock market in the long run boom even harder. But they hate uncertainty. That's the issue. That's why it's down so much. It's
Yep.
not because it's bad for the US. No, it's not that it's bad for the US. It's because it's uncertainty. They don't like uncertainty. And naturally, what the tariffs are going to do is it's going to affect the bottom line for a lot of companies in the short term. It's going to make them less profitable, make their reports look worse. Therefore, investors are going to make them worth less, et cetera. So there is a cascade effect with these tariffs in terms of how companies are going to be evaluated and how the stocks are going to perform. But just because the stock market has come down so much doesn't mean we're about to go into a complete fucking our country's about to blow up and the economy is going to collapse.
Yeah.
No, it's just saying we have a huge amount of uncertainty right now. We're going to de-risk, which obviously is going to bring down the price of stocks until you get to a bottoming structure, until you get to a point where the trade war is obviously starting to subside. You start to see the effects of the tariffs in real time with real economic data through Jerome Powell and the Fed. Once everybody's got some certainty, everybody knows how this thing's playing out, then you'll see the fucking market rip again in a month or two. So, but patience in the meantime. It's just patience. You have to be patient.
Yeah, I think you're going to see like the strategy that Warren Buffett had. He's going to go to the strongest U.S. dollar. They're going to rotate out of the risky assets, put it into a strong, stable U.S. dollar, wait for things to cool off, and then go in for there. But one of the things that I've been hearing online, kind of a counter argument to the domestic production in the United States, and I think it's a valid argument, but I also think it's not true. And I'll tell you why I think it's not true. Is that the United States will never be a manufacturing company again or country again because we keep saying company because it is a company. It's like you got to run it like a company, and Americans never will be a manufacturing country again because Americans don't want to do those jobs. They don't want to be in a factory snapping iPhones together or doing whatever, they do in factories overseas in India and in China, which is a valid argument, right? I don't know many people that are volunteering to go work in a factory. But where I think that they're missing the point of innovation in America. You have to create things that make jobs easier for people. And one of those things is AI and robotics. We're going to have such advanced technology with AI, robotic arms, putting things together in factories like Tesla has been doing. And they put the cars together pretty much using the AI. But what happens is you have to train people to train the AI, to build the mechanical robots that are going to snap these things together, and those are high paying jobs, those are high skilled jobs. You're not going to have people sitting on an assembly line and doing all this very intricate work on things for 20 hours a day. That's not how it's going to work. It's going to be robotics, people working with robotics in partnership with humans to put these things together, and it's going to be a 21st century manufacturing job. It's not going to be like a sweatshop over there. It's going to be high tech and innovative, and that's the whole point. Is we want to be more innovative. That's the whole point of bringing it back to America. Is we want to make it a more streamlined process to get stuff made. And another thing that people don't talk about too is the environmental effects. They're two of the biggest exporters in the world. China and India are also the two biggest polluters in the world. So if you do actually want to have a clean, safer economy, the U.S. has some of the strictest climate laws. Even though we might not agree with them all, they do have the strictest laws in place to make sure that your factories are clean. You're not polluting water around your factories. So isn't that like what you want as well? Wouldn't you want these factories to have the regulations of to not pollute the air and not pollute the water as they're making these high quality stuff with this advanced AI? So that's a counter argument that I've been hearing, is that Americans, don't want to do these jobs.
Yeah, and that's fair. That's fair. Now, here's the deal though. At this point, they do want to do the jobs
Yeah.
because they're getting eviscerated and they don't have a way to earn enough money to where they can live the American dream anymore. The American dream used to be I can have a job just as the man, be able to take care of my wife, 4 kids, pay all the bills, have an extra, go on a vacation, do these things. That was the American dream. If you're just the run of the mill blue collar job, you know, man's work. It's just not possible. You cannot live like that in the US. And you can't have the American dream. You're going to be paycheck to paycheck. You're going to be living well below what you would have liked to be able to live. And there's no longer the notion of your children is going to do better than you are. People don't believe that anymore. It used to be every generation is going to do better than the next generation because things should continue to improve. Standard of living should continue to go up. Wages should continue to go up. That's done. That doesn't even. There are kids that are doing well, much worse than their parents are doing, especially boomers, because boomers got so rich. They're doing much worse than their parents, and their parents are thinking to themselves, "Well, shit, I just did 40 years of work to finally, have kids, just try to send them to college, etc. And now they're in, college debt. I'm in debt because I tried to send them to college. I didn't pay off my mortgage yet. My kids aren't making that much money. It just it's destroyed that dream of just prosperity. It's gone.
And, something that I feel like the American culture used to have was that sense of, my dad worked in the factory. My dad worked and he built ovens for whoever, right? There used to be a sense of pride of people that used to work in the factories, like, oh, we make a good product and we put it on the shelves for Americans to use. And then we don't do that anymore. Nobody has a sense of pride in the stuff that they build. And I'm sure the people that do still build stuff in America do have pride. That's the whole thing of like made in America when you see that sticker. People are proud of what they make. So if you could inject that cultural part back into the economy of like, oh, my dad used to work in the factory or my dad worked in the steel mill. I'm going to go work in the steel mill. We don't have that anymore because people don't, like you said, I think people do now want to do those jobs, but there was a part of time there, maybe 30, 40 years where people didn't want to do those jobs. Everyone wanted to do something high end in tech or in finance. And not everybody can do those jobs is the reality. So I think if they could get back to that where these, like I said, that you're doing robotics and you're building cool shit and you're doing innovation to build cool shit in a factory somewhere and you have some pride in what you're building, I think you're going to see more people want to get into those fields and more people want to get into those jobs, which is the ultimate goal. And like you said, people just want to have a living wage. If even if you're only making 70,000, but the stuff you could buy is cheap, food's cheap, and you could rent a house for cheap or buy a house for cheap, that money will go further in your life as opposed to if you're making $80,000 for a shitty job you hate, but you can't afford anything. Gas is $5 a gallon, and groceries are through the roof. Like the eggs were $10, and when you're on a working salary like that, it's a lot tougher than when goods and stuff are cheap. So it's just stuff you got to be mindful of when you're going through economic policy, and that's the whole point is to make those people more wealthy with the tariffs. It's the middle class people that are making $50,000 to $200,000. That's the target group to make them more rich.
hmm Which is a good thing. That's what I'm saying. That's a good thing. You want those people, those are consumers. Those are the majority of the people who live in the country. You want them to be richer through other nations so that that money can come back to our economy, come back to our country, and continue to enrich the American people. That's the goal, right? Improve the lives of Americans. That should be the number one priority. So, and this will tie into the last point we'll make is two things. One, for the network, the organization that we're building, you want to be in a position where these things don't affect you on a personal level. The inflation, the cost of eggs, all this bullshit that we're talking about that does affect a lot of people, which is the reality. You want to be in a position where it doesn't affect you. You want to be in a position financially where you're earning enough money and you're investing it well enough where, regardless of inflation, regardless of non-inflation, regardless of markets down, up, you're making money no matter what, and you're not affected by these things. On top of that, right? So that's the first thing. You got to be in a position where this doesn't affect you. That's how you win the game. You got to be able to position yourself in a way where if markets are ripping because inflation's going up, you're making money. If markets are coming down, you still got an income coming in. So the second thing is notice how me and Bobby are always educated on what's happening on a macro level, economy, politics, wars, etc. Because this is how you make money. This is how you find opportunity. People who understand what's going on in the world can identify the opportunity. People who have no idea how tariffs work, no idea what's going on with the trade war, no idea what's going on with business, people who just are uneducated or just watch TV, they don't see opportunity because they don't understand how these things work on a technical basis. Bobby's doing this live call tonight with e-commerce. He understands how tariffs are going to affect supply chain. He understands how tariffs are going to affect products, where you source your products, how you make money on an e-com store. So he knows how to make money off the situation. When it comes to markets, if there's downside, I know how to make money off of it. If there's going to be more upside, I know how to position for that. There's ways to make money with this information, but you have to do it now, quickly. These times is when you have to move quick. This trade war, the dip in the market, you have to get positioned quickly because when it's time to go up again, you got to position for that. You got to be ready for that. And you got to know people who know what the fuck they're talking about so you can position for it. That's why we have people inside the Taylor's Code. That's why we have people inside of the network. So I just want to make that point. It's like you got to understand how these things work and be educated so that you can make money and position correctly.
Yeah, and just as hard as it falls sometimes, it's going to rip back up, and vice versa. Just as hard as it's going to rip back up, it could fall back down. So you have to have someone, like Priamo in the community who's analyzing charts every single day. He's in the trenches looking at these charts. He's drawing up demand zones. He's drawing up the supply zones, putting up his fibs and showing us where he believes that these are going to get to, like what levels we're going to get to, and where it could potentially go up from there or fall further from there. Depends on the situation in the stock or the coin. So those are the people that you need. You need someone who's going to be doing the heavy lifting for you, and then you could analyze yourself, and then you can make your own judgment based on your money, your supply amount that you got to inject into the market at the right time as well, whenever it's right for you. But in terms of like the e-com thing tonight, I think it's important for people to understand, what it takes to build a business. It's not just like, oh, I'm good at making logos, so I'm going to make a business. It's like, oh, well, that's not what the business is all about. The business is about making money, and if you're paying twice as much for your cost of goods sold, it's going to be a lot tougher to turn a profit on some of the things that you want to sell. So we're gonna take a look at some of that stuff and some of the economics behind, some of the big e-commerce dropshipping stores are used by AliExpress, Alibaba. That's where you get cheap products from China. But I believe in selling a quality product over, the quantity of the product. It's a lot easier to sell a good product as opposed to, just selling a cheap product you get from China anyway. So there's a lot of different things you could do in e-commerce in terms of building software and building digital products in today's day and age. A lot of people use software tools every single day. So if you could build something useful from that perspective, solve someone's problems, especially on the internet. You're not going to face no internet tariff yet. They haven't come up with that yet. So, those are something that you could think about. And if you're somebody who's computer savvy, tech savvy, and maybe you're really good in AI, is another industry that is super important to get into right now. And I've been really teaching myself a lot in the AI field, because one of the things that I wish, and Priamo can maybe attest to this, is I went to school for business, but I really wish I went to school for computer science and learned how to code and learned how to build software and learned how to, do that kind of stuff on the computer, because that's where you see a lot of money built. But in today's day and age with AI, you don't need to know how to code. You could just ask the AI to write the code for you, and it's all about AI prompting. So if you could become a professional AI prompter and learn how to tell the AI what you want, and the models out there are so good right now. I did a whole live stream on ChatGPT, the new ChatGPT 4.0. But I said on that stream how fast these things are evolving. Right? One week it was Grok, the new Grok. Then it was OpenAI 4.0. But now I'm onto something new. And if you guys join tonight inside of the Taylor's Code, I'll tell you guys what the new model is right now. That's the top dog. I'm sure it won't be for long, but there's a new one out there that is like amazing at coding and prompting it how you want it to code it. It'll write applications in HTML, JavaScript, C++, all of this stuff, and then you can save it direct to your folder. So that was a rant tangent, but just want to show you guys the broad scope of knowledge you need to have in today's day and age to be successful in business. It's not just, oh, I know how to make logos, so I'm gonna have a business. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Beautiful. All right. Well, outside of that, that's pretty much all I had, Harry.
Yeah, same here.
So let's give them. You want to give them a quick plug for your links, Taylor Code?
Yeah, links in the description of YouTube, Twitch. If you're watching this, oh, also I wanted to shout out. We had a Twitch sub.
Beauty.
Don't have their name up right now. I believe it was Kristen or something. So shout out to the Twitch subs during the stream. And if you're watching on Twitch, link in the description there. If you're watching on X, link in my bio there. I see we had a lot of X viewers today. So hoping to get the X live streams pumping, because so much visibility on there with good people in different industries. So appreciate all the viewers on X.
Beautiful. All right, ladies and gentlemen, on my side, same thing. We got double-digit live viewers across all platforms. Whatever platform you're watching on, link should be in the description, should be in my bio, should be in the channel bio, whatever. You'll be able to find it for the taylorscode.com. Join the private Discord, join the network for the ultimate professional. Inside, you're going to get access to myself, Logan, Bobby, all the gentlemen that we do business with, and you're going to get access to different campuses within the Discord. They're going to teach you how to make money, right? With myself, through investing, through equity markets through crypto, etc. With Bobby through building an e-commerce store or taking the one that you already have, auditing it, making it more profitable, scaling it out, doing more business, or the fitness campus if you just want to be able to put yourself in a physical state where you look like a specimen. You got six pack abs cracking, and you got your sleep, you got your health, you've got your mind, your body, your spirit, everything on point. Because again, doesn't matter how much money you make, doesn't matter how successful you are, doesn't matter how intelligent you are. If your body's failing you, if you're ill, if you're sick, if you don't live to a long, healthy age of 80, 90, 100 years old, what was it all for? Doesn't matter. Okay. You can't enjoy your wealth if you're bedridden. It doesn't do anything for you. You can't enjoy your wealth if you don't have a relationship with God or if you don't have some type of spirituality. It doesn't matter. So put yourself in a position to win at the highest levels. That's what we do, where it's a network of winners, savages, people who are working, people who are trying to make money, people who are trying to better themselves and better the network. Because the better that everybody else performs, the more successful everybody else becomes inside the network. It benefits the whole. So we want you to get rich. We want you to make money because guess what? If you're a part of my network and you're making money and you're driving supercars, that's another buddy I can have. So, or another person I can do business with. So we'll see you inside the network. Link is in the description. Join should take you to a Stripe checkout. We'll get you a Discord link, get you into the Discord, and we'll start hustling. All right. Boom. Outside of that, I'm gonna do a little Mr. Producer.
Boom.